Hey, Detroit, we're back with another episode of Detroit Next, a project that is a joint effort by BridgeDetroit and Detroit is Different to bring you really critical information in 2025 about all of the choices that Detroiters are going to make this year. We're going to elect a new mayor, city council, all 9 of those seats are up, city clerk, all kinds of things will be on the ballot for the primary or in the general. And we have put this together to make sure that you get really important information. Policy analysis looks at the candidates, looks at some of the questions that those candidates will be facing here. I'm Stephen Henderson.
I'm Malachi Barrett.
And we are both from Bridge Detroit,
Yeah.
but we should always say that. And you can support all of this work at bridgedetroit.com. You can go to detroitisdifferent.com. You'll also find at both places lots more information about the races and the city and the issues. Malachi, this time we want to talk specifically about a really important issue in the city. It's come up already a couple times in the race. We're going to talk about development, how we make sure development happens in Detroit. You know, I'm old enough now that I remember when it was a huge deal if somebody was building something in Detroit, something new. Now, it's just kind of run-of-the-mill kind of stuff. We're in a different era. That brings its own challenges and figuring out how to make sure that keeps going and benefits everyone it should. It's going to be an issue in the race. But before we get to development, we should talk about the news this week. There's always news. There's always news.
There's always some
election.
news, right? Yeah. Well, it's Bryce Huffman from Bridge Detroit, who's behind the camera today. We're going to be going to 2 campaign launches. So be sure, I think by the time this episode is out, that content will be up online. James Craig is having his big kickoff at the Rooster Tail along the river. And Jonathan Barlow, who's a businessman and maybe one of the lesser known candidates, is having his own kickoff event at the People's Food Co-op. I'm interested, I've talked to him a couple times. He's presented himself as a very pro-business candidate. He wants Detroit to be the most business-friendly city in Michigan, he says. Craig has not really spoken too much about that issue yet, so eager to hear more about what his vision for development is. Today on the show, we're going to have Fred Durhal on, City Council member for District 7.
Yes.
He is also, I would say, probably among the more pro-business friendly candidates on this ticket.
Yeah.
As he said,
he's running for mayor instead of for running for his council seat.
Right.
And is somebody who is pretty pro-business. I mean, he's not been shy about his enthusiasm for all the development that goes on.
I don't think we'll probably hear a candidate say that they are anti-business or anti-development.
Yeah.
Everyone has said that we need to keep the development momentum in the city going in the right direction, the direction it's been going under Mayor Duggan. I think where the points of differentiation may come is their philosophy around tax abatements and how we incentivize that development. Covering the city council over the last couple of years, it has been a frequent point of consternation, I guess that's a $5 word, for residents who are concerned about the benefit. Is that spreading? Is this kind of subsidy scheme that we've been doing, is that the best way to attract development in the city? And it's a very big, complicated topic. But
yeah, I mean, I think the fear that the big picture fear is, are private businesses which have enough capital or can get their hands on enough capital to create these developments, are they taking advantage of a city that didn't have development for a long time and so is desperate to have it, and is a city that's still financially, struggling. I mean, it struggles to deliver the things that the people who live here need every day. And so is this idea that in order to build a Little Caesars Arena or the new Hudson's Tower, or even some of the smaller projects, is that worth the government's support and money at the expense of other things? And we've been fighting about that for a long time in Detroit. Even when there wasn't a lot of development, there were questions about these kind of subsidies and help. I think it's taken on a more critical kind of dimension in the last 10 years because we have so much development and the subsidies are only getting larger. I had a conversation with the mayor at some point about why we're spending more now than we used to try to incentivize these developments when things are getting better. By everybody's account, this is a better development environment than it was 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. The argument back then was you had to do this to get us to this point, right? You had to kind of light the pilot of the idea of people doing this development. So that costs you money up front. Okay. So now we're at a point, though, where people want to do deals in Detroit. They want to build things, they want to create stuff, and we're still subsidizing. And in some cases, really throwing a lot of money at these things. And so what's the end point, right? What's the place we get to where we don't have to do that at all, or are doing it really strategically to make sure that we're getting the best development? It still feels like we're on our knees, kind of begging for this kind of development, and then doing whatever we can to get people to do it.
If you imagine back to when the Downtown Development Authority was created in the late 70s, it was in response to a exodus, as it's even described at the time, of businesses and residents from the
Everyone
downtown.
was leaving.
I think it's changed now to, like your point, businesses and companies want to come be part of Detroit, but the struggle continues to be that the property taxes in the city are so high compared to our neighbors. And so we're a big user of tax abatements because we struggle to compete for some of that investment because our property taxes are so high. As the Mayor Duggan has said, and it was a big reason he wanted to pass some tax reforms in the legislature that ultimately didn't go anywhere. Compared to all of our neighbors, we're much higher when it comes to property taxes. And property taxes are making up a smaller portion of revenue compared to other revenue sources. So because those costs are so high, and then you think of the complexities that come with renovating dilapidated buildings or old historic buildings and cleaning up environmental pollution. A lot of these development sites have contamination one way or another. The argument is that these are still needed because the cost of locating here in the city just doesn't really bring the rate of return on the investment for a lot of the developers. When does that change? I don't know. I mean, it seems like there's not really an end in sight for this, at least when you talk to the leaders now.
Yeah,
right?
nobody seems to think there is an end in sight. I think the other real dimension of this that people are starting to think about is, are there other ways, right? If you were to get rid of these subsidies or say we're going to do less of it, what's the counterbalance move to keep the development train rolling? And there are other things that we could be doing. Cities come up with stuff all the time. I think we have just kind of fallen into a pattern in Detroit where this is the way we do business. Developers know that, and so their demands to do these things always include that subsidy, and then we don't get past that. The next mayor is going to have a harder time, I think, dealing with this than Mike Duggan did, in part because of that. This is just it's like the wallpaper in the room. There's nothing you can do about it without a real effort to change it, and I don't know that anyone has come up with anything. I do think, though, that eventually you have to start talking about the property tax itself as this disincentive and what you can do about it. There's been a lot of discussion, not at the council table or in the mayor's office, about whether you could eliminate that property tax or greatly reduce it, really reduce it. I think one of the things I would hope we might see in this race is the candidates start to talk in those terms about it. Let's stop fighting about incentives. Let's talk about some of the other things that can be done.
If we were to make a meaningful dent in that property tax, the abatements would become less necessary.
That's
right?
absolutely right.
Every budget year, the mayor manages to slice a couple of mills off the operating millage, part of the property tax. He's again suggesting that in his budget, and I don't think there's any controversy that it will probably go through. I think part of the problem too is a lot of our property taxes are going to pay off debt. Debt for the school system.
They pay debt, and they also pay operating millages for other institutions. Schools, libraries, museums, the zoo. There are a lot of things. There are a lot of people kind of taking money out of that pot. If the city eliminated its share entirely, you'd still be in just the medium range in terms of comparing our rate to other cities.
Mm.
You wouldn't get below what other cities are doing, but it would make us more competitive. There's nothing you can do as mayor about those other things. But that's even more argument in some cases, I think, to talk about elimination of the city's share of property tax because it would be, it is a big chunk of it that would go away.
Just to, give some numbers, a little more context around kind of the current state of play, the status quo of tax breaks in Detroit. So the Citizens Research Council of Michigan was actually hired by the city council last year to do a series of reports to really investigate how is this working?
Yeah.
Are there things we can do to change it? And they gave a pretty good accounting of the most recent history. Basically, there were 171 development projects that received some type of tax break from 2017 to 2023. And those were worth a total of $843 million.
Yeah.
Um,
Almost $1 billion.
right. And that is supposed to create about $7.5 billion in investment
Mhm.
and about 24,000 new jobs. So that's, again, the trade-off here.
That's
is
what we're
you,
supposed to be getting.
you get that out of it. We'll see if that happens. What's interesting, though, is most of that, I mean, the vast majority, 93% of those projects are downtown, midtown, and along the riverfront. So how can we spread some of that development outside in those tools to incentivize
Yeah.
development outside? And just so people kind of understand a little bit, one of the main tools, tax increment financing is what it's called. And don't be scared by that terminology. We'll break it down. Basically, it's used to subsidize the cost of construction, environmental cleanup, and some other things with development. And any new property tax revenue that is created from the value of that property increasing because development has happened there basically gets captured and redirected back to the developer to reimburse them for costs.
Yeah.
So we're slicing the growth of if that tax value and giving it back to developers so that they can cover some of the costs that make it hard to do that business, and they're reimbursed. The Citizens Research Council basically found that this system is unfair because relying on tax abatements basically means that people who don't get them have higher costs than the businesses and that do get them, and residents certainly don't get any kind of tax break like this. So we're kind of picking winners and losers when it comes to these development projects. And there's been a lot of criticism from groups like Detroit People's Platform, Detroiters for Tax Justice, and things like that about how these tax captures really prevent the city from taking advantage of the growth in the property taxes that have come as a result of this development. Because again, it's being reimbursed to the developers. It's not going into schools, libraries, and those things. The tricky thing about that is, basically all of that growth is happening because there's a development. So it's kind of like a chicken and the egg situation, I guess.
If you didn't build Little Caesars Arena or the Hudson's Tower in the first place, you wouldn't have the opportunity for the growth in tax revenue that would come from that development, and that money wouldn't materialize anyway. It's a
Right.
weird thing to think about. It's kind of like an if come, right? So if you build this thing and it does well enough, there would be this tax revenue that it would generate, and we're forgiving that in the future in order to get it built. I think any developer, anyone who's ever developed anything in Detroit will tell you that if come never really materializes in many of these cases because it is still a tough development environment. If you sit down and do the numbers, most developments here don't yield the kind of profit that you would get if you did it somewhere else, right?
Mhm.
If you did it in the suburbs, if you went to another city, you would do better. And so it's kind of a strange thing to get your mind around. But in the end, it is saying that the city will forego tax revenue at some point in order to make these things possible.
Right. And these deals are over a period of usually 15 to 30 years.
Long period.
So you don't, it basically takes like a generation almost, if you think about 30 years for the schools and libraries to then take advantage of that new growth. So that's been a major criticism.
Yeah.
Another major criticism is just that, some of the largest abatements that we've seen in recent years have gone to folks like Dan Gilbert and the Illiches, multi-millionaires. And there's a general feeling that you guys can absorb more of
They
this
should be able
cost.
to eat more of it.
Right. Whether that's true or not, that is a criticism that I've frequently heard. It's like, why are we giving, the most wealthy people these benefits that maybe they could they could handle because they have so much capital to work with, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and the other thing that's kind of lurking behind this was something you were mentioning, which is most of these projects are in downtown and midtown along the riverfront. Could you do this more creatively in a way that would help people in other parts of the city where development is also really tough uh, to make these projects work better? And no one has come up really with a way to do that. Now, some I think some of what is supposed to be happening is that these developments are supposed to be creating a better environment overall for development in the city and making it easier
Mhm.
in some of these other places. But we've had some real trouble doing that. Banks have not seen it that way. Banks are, of course, major sources of funding for these developments. They are going to lend downtown and on the riverfront and midtown. They're not going to necessarily lend on the far west or the far east side. The other thing is that the developments themselves are not yielding enough difference. I mean, they
Mm.
are changing things like uh, you know. Uh, the number of people in downtown and the activity there, but they aren't changing the business environment in the way that they're, and developers themselves are the ones who are saying that. If you talk to people who are in the middle of developments right now, they'll say things are not different enough than they were in 2005 or 2000 for that to happen.
Yeah, and I think, another important piece of this, why the mayor's race is important. The mayor has a lot of control over who sits on the board
Yeah,
of the Downtown Development Authority,
100%.
the Economic Growth Corporation, and these other uh, economic organizations that basically recruit businesses and help create some of the justification, basically for they're the ones that do the analysis that says whether this is necessary or not. And so, one recommendation was actually maybe to give City Council more control over that.
Yes.
But regardless, whoever the next mayor is going to be is going to play a major role in all this because they will sit at the head of basically those organizations as well.
Yeah. So we do want to talk with Fred Durhal, city council person from District
7.
7. I always get the numbers mixed up. I don't want to say the wrong one about this. This is one of the issues in his wheelhouse. Let's hear what he had to say about development and his campaign for mayor.
All right, welcome back to Detroit Next. Today, I am happy to say we have City Council member Fred Durhal joining us on the show, mayoral candidate, representative for District 7, and a former state lawmaker as well. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We are talking about development today. I feel like you're probably one of the best candidates to talk to about this, given your work on the city council. I guess maybe just to start, walk us through a little bit about what your kind of philosophy or approach to getting more development, in your district and across the city has been like as a city council member.
First, we can't have enough development here in the city. We are a city that is rising from the ashes, as they say. The phoenix rising from the ashes. We want to make sure it doesn't fly into the window. So we've got to keep development moving here. More development means more jobs. More jobs means more opportunity for folks to come back into the neighborhoods, pay their rent, pay their mortgage, and help stabilize our neighborhoods. And so I've been a proponent of development here in the city of Detroit just because of that opportunity, that same type of opportunity that many Detroiters moved to Detroit from back in the South, back in the day, from the South back in the day. We want to keep it going here in the city.
I think about your district, and I think back to last year. I think it was when the State of the City address was in your district at a church along Dexter Avenue, and a lot of the conversation was like, "Look at how much has happened here in this corridor. There's these parks, the rec centers, up and running. You got a new rec center coming in your district, I think, as well. What does some of that change really look like in the last couple of years, and how did we actually make that happen?"
I think we made it happen because I've been very unapologetic about development, particularly in my district. When I got elected, I sat down with the mayor after having, tons of conversations with residents of what they wanted to see. They felt that my district was forgotten. We had 0 rec centers in our district. Now we've got 2. One, an $8.5 million recreation center at the Dexter Elmhurst Community Center, and the other a $20 million recreation center at the old Brennan Pool site from the Detroit Pistons. But we didn't stop there. We needed more jobs. So the old AMC site that sat vacant for over 20 years is now an automotive supplier for General Motors and creating about 300 new jobs. But affordable housing opportunities. We got a $30 million bond from the state of Wisconsin that doesn't cost taxpayers anything. And we turn the old Hawthorne Suite sites in my district to affordable housing. But you've got to be very unapologetic about development. You've got to use the necessary tools and resources that we have to keep it going. And that's what we've been pushing for.
I'm glad you brought up unapologetic. I keyed in that as well. You've said that a couple of times. Covered this a lot, the different development projects that have come through the city council over the last few years. There's always a bit of pushback from certain community groups that feel like maybe we're a little bit overbalanced. We're balanced in one direction in terms of like giving out tax subsidies and these things that, as Steve and I talk about in the front end of the show, are kind of needed to make a lot of projects like financially make sense and happen in the first place. Do you feel like, why are you kind of distinguishing yourself on that issue, being unapologetic about it? What is that in response to?
Well, I'm distinguishing myself from that because I think a lot of folks tend to stray away from development, the use of tax abatements and incentives simply because they don't understand it. Frankly, they are tools to be used to spawn development here in the city of Detroit in an environment where it's expensive to do development here. We hear developers come in front of us all the time and they talk about the but for, meaning that they could spawn development in corridors that are close to us in our region for half the price because the taxes are not as high. You look at our tax millage here right now, we're twice as much as our closest city in population, which is Grand Rapids. So it costs more to do development here in the city of Detroit. A lot of the buildings are a lot older. So a lot of brown fields, no green fields, definitely floating around. And so we distinguish ourselves because we know it's a necessary tool. Do we get to a point where we kind of titrate ourselves down off of how we use incentives? Absolutely. But there's also opportunities to take those developments and kind of change them so we can spawn even more development out into our communities, into our commercial corridors, create walkable communities here, and ensure that we are doing everything we can for all of our residents here in the city.
I think a lot of work has been done to make Detroit more attractive for development. Especially going back over the lifetime of the Downtown Development Authority, going back to like the late 70s. It seems like much more of an attractive place to do business. But that high property tax, as you just outlined, like that's a fundamental problem that is just kind of standing in the way of our ability to lean off using some of these tax abatements. So, when do you kind of envision a future, like how far down the road do you think it would be where we're able to peel back on using some of these? And is there a way to do that without cutting property taxes? How important do you think reducing the property tax burden in general is to incentivizing development, allowing development to happen?
Well, I think that's number one. Driving down property taxes here in the city, not just for developers, but for residents, is going to be one of my number one priorities. We're developing right now a comprehensive tax relief plan that will cut those mills down, but also ensure everybody pays their fair share. And I'll give you an example. We have right now undeveloped land that sits here in the city of Detroit that can generate a ton of income. We see them used as parking lots and flat surfaces. They generate close to $2 million per year, but they're paying $10,000 to $15,000 a year in taxes. That's not their fair share. While the brunt of that liability goes on the residents and goes to other folks who are utilizing their businesses in productive ways that's generating revenue for the city, whether that's property tax revenue or income tax revenue. And so when we look at it, that's going to be one of my number one goals. As far as the abatements are concerned, I think they're necessary until we get to a point where we can say, all right, we've lowered property taxes here. The market has started to stabilize a little bit. The cost to do business here is not as much, then we can start looking at that. But we also can take some of those tools and do what our residents want to see, which are vibrant commercial corridors. You're going to hear me talk about that a lot because when we look at major metropolitan cities around the nation, that's what they're doing. You go to DC, you go to Chicago, you go to some of these other places in the regions, and they are using tax abatements and tax incentives. I always use Columbus, Ohio as an example. Intel decided to come there and create thousands of jobs because Columbus gave over $2 billion in tax incentives.
Wow.
But it was a partnership between their state, their county, and that city saying, we want those jobs to come here because we also know that the economy improves when those jobs come here. And also, we'll be able to generate more income tax revenue and not necessarily be reliant on other tax revenue.
That does seem to be kind of the fundamental argument is that, over a short-term period, we're going to get a long-term benefit, right? There's a couple things in what you said there that I want to follow up on. First of all, what can you tell us about your tax reform plan? That's pretty interesting.
Well, we're going to release it. I know
Yeah.
as a reporter, you want to get the first
I
take
do,
at
yeah.
it. But what I could say is it's going to be focused on making speculators pay more.
Mm.
It is going to be focused on reducing that tax mill a little bit over 19. We're going to be 19 mills. We're going to be very aggressive. Of course, it's going to require approval from the state legislature, which I'm not fearful of as a former legislator. Most of the folks that serve in the state senate, I serve with in the House.
Yeah.
And the others I know from the House because they were either employees of those other reps or senators now. And so we've got great relationships in Lansing. And so we're going to push that forward. There's some other tweaks that we're going to do that we're not going to release as of yet. But we are working with economists on our plans. We're just not coming out of the sky saying we want to lower property taxes and we don't know how. We're developing that comprehensive plan, talking to some of the economists, but also developer roundtables, but also residents of what they would like to see and the type of opportunities we can provide for them in their neighborhoods.
Would generally the idea be, though, that you are able to make up any lost revenue by charging speculators more, that they would cover that gap from reducing everyone else's property taxes?
Yeah, that's one of the ways. We're going to have a revenue neutral plan. So it is not going to harm our general fund in any way. But the second piece is we're going to, without going too deep into it, we're going to look at how we do assessments here.
Interesting.
There are other cities that use an income-based model for assessments. So I'll give you an example. When we talk about the comps, there's two buildings that may be in the same commercial corridor. One building, has 300 employees that come to work every single day. The other building is a Detroit headquarter business, but nobody comes there, so they don't frequent the corridors. The corridors get no revenue. The restaurants don't get any revenue from that business, but yet they're taxed the same because of the comp. But they're not necessarily the same. We've got to look at those businesses and those buildings that are helping us generate revenue every single day, provide a little bit of relief for them, but also subsidize that relief from those who are not providing the opportunity for the city of Detroit to generate revenue through their business.
And you've talked about expanding the DDA. Tell me more about that. Are we talking about expounding the actual boundary or creating DDA-like entities along, Dexter, Kercheval, Jefferson, these different, 6 Mile, these different corridors we're talking about?
Yeah, no, we're talking about expanding the DDA, which from, our talks will not necessarily require legislative approval from Lansing, but just approval from the Detroit City Council. You've seen it happen before because the DDA expanded into the central business district where you see LC at right now. The idea behind that is if we expand this out into commercial corridors and not just Gratiot, not just Michigan Avenue, but all out into further commercial corridors, we can create a main street in every single council district here. Everybody loves the avenue of fashion that exists here, but there's opportunity to do that in every single district here in the city of Detroit. Walkable communities include this: fresh groceries or access to fresh groceries, access to a pharmacy where you don't have to drive 10 to 15 minutes to go pick up your prescription, but also retail opportunities. And what our idea behind this is when we talk about expanding the DDA, it'll also create an environment for small businesses to thrive. We can push for more entrepreneurship and creation of small business. And that helps tackle one of the biggest problems we have here in the city of Detroit, which is access to generational wealth.
So that's going to do it for this episode of Detroit Next. We will be back soon with more about what's going on in the mayor's race, the city council race, all the other things that are happening here in 2025. Another reminder, you can always go to BridgeDetroit.com, DetroitisDifferent.com to get more information, even more information about these races, about candidates and issues, about voting in the city. There's going to be some very important voter guides that we'll all produce this year to help people make their decisions. And of course, while you're at those places getting all this information, you can support these organizations, both Bridge Detroit and Detroit is Different.
We really want to hear from you guys. We set up a phone line so we can actually take calls from folks. That number is 313-284-6407. You can leave us a voicemail message and we'll play these on air. So I'm excited for some of those to start roll in. You can find an audio version of this podcast if you're watching on YouTube. Hello, it's nice to see you. If you're listening, hello. You can't see me waving my hand. But we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and DetroitNext.podbean.com. We're going to be doing this all year round, so stick with us and definitely support Bridge Detroit and Detroit is Different.
Yeah, and we'll have all the candidates here. We've had 2 of them so far, Solomon Kinlock and Fred Durhal. Up next is Mary Sheffield. At least that's on the slate. So,
and we're reaching out to some community folks as well, some people who know about development and some of these different issues.
People who can talk about the issues alongside the candidates.
So if you get an email from us, come on the show.
Come on the show.
Detroit Next is a community-led project from Bridge Detroit and Detroit is Different, which means that we can't do this work without you. We need your support. If you have a question or a comment and want to participate in this process throughout the year, give us a call. We have a phone line set up at 313-284-6407. Leave us a message and we'll play it on the podcast. If you like what we're doing, head to BridgeDetroit.com and subscribe to our newsletters. All of that content, again, is free, no paywalls for anybody. We're trying to make this as accessible as possible. Head to our YouTube channel to get full episodes and interviews along with extra content throughout the year. You can also find the audio version of this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and DetroitNext.podbean.com. We're going to be doing this all year long, so stay with us. Follow Bridge Detroit and Detroit is Different on your favorite social media platforms and take this ride with us. Thanks.